The survey ship Stargazer sliced silently through the clouds, its sleek form barely disturbing the atmosphere as it descended toward the lush expanse of green below. Inside the vessel's pristine command center, Dr. Eris Thorne frowned at the readouts flickering across his console. His amphibious features, the subtle gill ridges along his neck and the faint blue-green tint to his otherwise humanoid skin, tensed with concentration. Preliminary scans indicate unusually high biodiversity levels, Thorne announced, his voice carefully measured despite his growing unease. Millions of species interacting in completely unpredictable patterns. Confirming previous classification, Level 5 hazardous ecosystem. Standing beside him, Kyra Volan nodded, her younger, more vibrant features betraying a hint of excitement that Thorne found inappropriate given the circumstances. The atmospheric composition matches our projections, she said, adjusting her communication systems. But the electromagnetic activity is fascinating. There's something almost rhythmic about it. Fascinating is not the word I would choose, Thorne replied tersely. Remember our protocols. This is a preliminary survey only. Remote scans, limited automated sampling, absolutely no direct contact. He glanced momentarily at the small figure seated at the auxiliary station. Xyler, review the safety protocols again. The child, approximately 8 Earth years old, straightened in his seat. His features mirrored Thorne's, though softer, with larger eyes that held an unmistakable gleam of curiosity. Yes, Father. The Xylos Federation classifies Earth as a Level 5 hazardous ecosystem due to uncontrolled biological proliferation, unpredictable weather patterns, and indigenous predatory species. All observations must be conducted from within the protective environment of the Stargazer or authorized environmental suits. Under no circumstances should. Very good, Thorne interrupted, visibly pleased with his son's perfect recitation. He had been reluctant to bring Xyler on this mission, but the educational opportunity was deemed valuable by the Council. Besides, with proper precautions, the risk was minimal. Their technology was designed to keep the chaotic natural world at a safe distance. The robotic assistant, Rorik 7, pivoted its sensory array toward the main viewport. Statistical anomaly detected in atmospheric electromagnetic patterns. Probability of deviation from standard profile, 89.7%. Kyra leaned forward, her interest piqued. What kind of? The question died on her lips as a blinding flash illuminated the command center. The Stargazer lurched violently, throwing the crew against their restraints. Electromagnetic surge. Rorik 7 announced, its mechanical voice somehow conveying urgency. Systems compromised. Navigation failing. Power redistribution recommended. Thorne's fingers flew across his console, but the ship continued its erratic descent. Kyra, reroute auxiliary power to the stabilizers. Rorik, run emergency landing protocols. What's happening, Father? Xyler's voice trembled slightly, but he remained at his station, eyes wide. An unpredicted storm, Thorne replied, struggling to maintain his composure. Earth's natural systems are more volatile than our data suggested. The view screen showed they were now plummeting toward a dense section of rainforest, far from their intended survey area. Trees rushed up to meet them, an impossibly thick tapestry of green. Brace for impact, Thorne shouted, throwing protective arms around his son as the Stargazer crashed through the canopy and slammed into the forest floor. For several long moments, the only sound was the hiss of emergency systems engaging and the ping of cooling metal. Then, gradually, another sound filtered through, the cacophony of the Amazon rainforest, a symphony of life utterly foreign to the Xylosian crew. Status report, Thorne demanded, releasing Xyler and quickly checking him for injuries. Rorik 7 responded first. Hull integrity at 92%. Life support functioning within acceptable parameters. However, propulsion systems are offline. Communications array damaged. Long-range transmitters non-functional. Kyra was already running diagnostics. The electromagnetic surge has fried several key circuits. We can repair them, but She hesitated. It will take time, and some of the components will need to be fabricated from scratch. Thorne moved to the viewport, which now displayed not the open sky, but a claustrophobic tangle of vegetation. Moisture beaded on the transparent material, evidence of the oppressive humidity outside. How long? 3 days, minimum, Kyra replied. Perhaps longer without proper facilities. Thorne suppressed a shudder. 3 days stranded in one of the most dangerous environments on this uncontrolled planet. He turned to his son, who was staring transfixed at the viewport. Father, look. Xyler pointed at a flash of brilliant blue that had momentarily appeared before vanishing back into the green chaos. What was that? A native flying insect? Most likely, Thorne replied, his tone deliberately clinical. Potentially poisonous, which is precisely why we must establish security perimeters immediately. He turned to Rorik 7. Activate all defensive fields. Maximum sensitivity on motion sensors. Nothing larger than a microbe gets within 50 meters of this ship without our knowledge. Proceeding, the robot confirmed, moving to the security station. Kyra approached Thorne, speaking quietly. Doctor, my cultural database indicates this region is likely inhabited by indigenous human tribes. If any approach, the security field will detect them, and we will avoid contact. Thorne cut her off. Our mission parameters are clear, Kyra. No interaction with local sentients, especially not technologically primitive ones. But they might have knowledge that could. Knowledge? Thorne scoffed. These creatures live in constant exposure to microbial threats, predatory animals, and unfiltered atmospheric radiation. They have no controlled environments, no advanced medical knowledge. What could they possibly teach us? Kyra hesitated, then nodded respectfully. Of course, Doctor. I'll begin repairs on the communications array. As the adults busied themselves with emergency procedures, Xyler remained at the viewport, watching in fascination as more flashes of color appeared. Birds with impossible plumage, insects with translucent wings that caught the dappled sunlight. The security field hummed to life, an invisible wall between the ordered world of the stargazer and the chaotic vitality outside. In the hours that followed, the crew established their emergency protocols. Kyra and Rorik 7 focused on repairs, while Thorne obsessively monitored the security systems, cataloging each potential threat detected by their sensors. The data was overwhelming. Microorganisms by the billions, plants producing complex chemical compounds, animals with hunting patterns that defied simple analysis. Xyler was assigned to help Rorik 7 with basic repair tasks, but the child's attention continually drifted to the viewport. The world outside was nothing like the sterile, controlled environments of Xylo's prime. There, nature existed in carefully managed biodomes. Every organism cataloged, its behavior predicted, its purpose defined. Here, life seemed to explode in all directions, following patterns too complex for even their advanced systems to fully map. As artificial night fell inside the stargazer, maintained to preserve the crew's circadian rhythms despite the external light cycles, Xyler lay in his sleeping pod, listening to the muted sounds that penetrated even the ship's insulation. Hoots, chatters, rustles, and occasional roars created a symphony unlike anything in the Xylosian sound archives. Rorik, he whispered, knowing the robot remained active during rest periods. What makes that sound? The one that goes. He attempted to imitate a distant howl. Insufficient data, Rorik 7 replied. Likely a mammalian predator marking territory. I advise focusing on rest, young Xyler. Dr. Thorne has scheduled your assistance for early tomorrow. Xyler nodded dutifully, but sleep eluded him. His education had included extensive studies of exobiology, but all from a clinical, detached perspective. The actual experience, even filtered through the ship's barriers, was intoxicating in its complexity. The next morning, while Thorne and Kyra argued over repair priorities, Xyler found himself alone at an auxiliary console, ostensibly running diagnostics on the atmospheric filters. Instead, he was reviewing security footage from the external cameras. One particular sensor had captured a small, brilliant blue creature, the same one he'd glimpsed yesterday, repeatedly visiting a flowering plant near the ship. Its wings moved too fast for the eye to follow, and it hovered with impossible precision as it extracted something from the flower center. A hummingbird, the database supplied. Harmless nectar feeder. Metabolic rate requiring constant feeding. No direct threat to xylosian physiology. No direct threat. The phrase echoed in Zyler's mind. He glanced toward the command center, where his father and Kyra remained deep in technical discussion. Rorik, 7, was in the engine compartment, realigning power couplings. The security field was controlled from his console as a backup system. It would be simple to create a small gap, just for a moment, just long enough to see the hummingbird up close. After all, he'd been studying Earth organisms for years in preparation for this mission. He knew the precautions. Before rationality could override curiosity, Zyler's fingers danced across the console. A small section of the field, just 2 meters square on the side of the ship away from the command center, wavered and dissipated. A warning flashed, but he quickly suppressed it, redirecting the alert to a maintenance subroutine where it would be lost among routine notifications. Heart pounding, Zyler slipped from his station and made his way to the rarely used auxiliary airlock. The inner door opened silently at his approach. He hesitated only briefly before stepping inside and initiating the cycle. There was a gentle hiss as the chamber pressurized to match the external environment, and then the outer door slid open. The first thing that struck him was the smell, rich, complex, almost overwhelming. His sensitive gill ridges flared involuntarily, processing the thousands of airborne compounds. The second was the heat, pressing against his skin like a living thing, accompanied by humidity that made each breath feel substantial. Zyler stepped cautiously onto the forest floor, his boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. The security field gap was directly ahead, invisible but marked by a subtle distortion in the air. He moved toward it slowly, every sense heightened to an almost painful degree. The gap was just wide enough for him to slip through. Once outside the perimeter, he stood motionless, overwhelmed by the unfiltered reality of Earth. The sounds were clearer now, the colors more vibrant. Everything pulsed with life in a way that no simulation could capture. The hummingbird appeared suddenly, hovering just meters away, its iridescent feathers catching the sunlight that filtered through the canopy. Zyler held his breath, afraid the slightest movement might frighten it away. The tiny creature seemed to consider him for a moment before darting to a nearby flower. Captivated, Zyler followed, careful to mark his path. Just a little closer, he thought. Just a little longer to observe. His father's warnings seemed distant now, academic concerns that paled against the reality of direct experience. He didn't notice how far he'd strayed until the hummingbird vanished into the canopy above, leaving him alone among towering trees. The stargazer was no longer visible through the dense vegetation. A flicker of panic rose in his chest, but he suppressed it, remembering his training. Observe your surroundings. Identify landmarks. Retrace your steps methodically. But the rainforest floor looked frustratingly uniform to his untrained eyes. What had seemed like distinct plants now blended together in a bewildering tapestry of green. He turned slowly, trying to identify the direction he'd come from, when a sound froze him in place, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. 20 meters away, partially concealed by a fallen log, was a creature that matched nothing in Zyler's education. It was muscular and lithe, with a coat of golden fur marked by distinctive rosette patterns. Its eyes, fixed unblinkingly on Zyler, were a startling yellow-green. Jaguar, his mind supplied from the database. Apex predator. Ambush hunter. Powerful bite force capable of penetrating skulls. For a moment, neither moved. Then, with terrifying suddenness, the jaguar launched itself forward. Zyler's legs, locked in fear, finally responded. He turned to run, but the uneven terrain betrayed him. His foot caught on an exposed root, and he stumbled, falling hard against the forest floor. The impact, knocked the breath from his lungs. He rolled onto his back just as the jaguar reached him. Time seemed to slow as the massive predator's jaws opened, revealing gleaming fangs. Xyler threw up an arm in a futile defensive gesture. Pain exploded through his forearm as the jaguar's teeth punctured his environmental suit and sank into the flesh beneath. The predator didn't clamp down fully, seemingly confused by the strange texture and perhaps the unfamiliar taste of Xylosian blood. Instead, it held Xyler's arm in its jaws, pinning him to the ground while its powerful body tensed for the killing bite. Xyler screamed, the sound tearing from his throat in a pitch that no human child would produce. Higher, with harmonics that vibrated uncomfortably in the air. The jaguar's ears flattened, but it didn't release its grip. If anything, the strange sound seemed to convince it that this unusual prey needed to be dispatched quickly. "Help!" Xyler called, this time in the standard frequency. "Father, Kyra, anyone!" His free hand scrabbled uselessly at the ground beside him, finding nothing but soft earth and leaf litter. The jaguar growled around his captured arm, its powerful body shifting as it prepared to deliver a fatal bite to his throat. "This is how I die," Xyler thought with sudden, strange clarity. Not in the sterile safety of Xylo's prime, but in this wild, untamed place, becoming part of its endless cycle of life and death. Then, impossibly, something changed. The jaguar's attention shifted, its yellow-green eyes focusing on something beyond Xyler. A soft, rhythmic sound pierced the forest, not mechanical, but not quite natural either. A pattern of clicks and whistles, followed by a low, melodic call. The jaguar's grip on Xyler's arm loosened slightly. Its ears twitched forward, then back, betraying uncertainty. The strange sounds continued, neither threatening nor submissive, but somehow commanding attention. Slowly, painfully, Xyler turned his head toward the source. Through tears of pain, he saw a figure approaching, unmistakably human, though unlike any he'd seen in the educational databases. This was no city dweller in synthetic clothing, but a young woman who seemed as much a part of the forest as the trees themselves. She moved with unnatural grace, each step deliberate yet flowing. Her skin was a rich brown, adorned with subtle patterns in some kind of natural pigment. Her clothing, minimal in the humid heat, appeared to be made from plant fibers and perhaps animal skins. Around her neck hung various pouches and small objects that Xyler couldn't identify. Most striking was her expression. Not fear, not even surprise at the sight of an alien child in the jaws of a jaguar. Instead, her face showed a focused calm, an absolute presence in the moment that Xyler had never witnessed in any Xylosian. She continued the strange pattern of sounds, now interspersed with words in a language Xyler couldn't comprehend. Her movements remained slow, deliberate, giving the jaguar time to process her presence. She never looked directly at the predator for more than a second, instead keeping her gaze mobile, respectful. The jaguar growled again, but with less conviction. Its jaws relaxed further, though still maintaining a hold on Xyler's arm. The human woman reached slowly into one of her pouches and withdrew something small, a stone, Xyler realized. With a flick of her wrist, she sent it flying, not at the jaguar but to the side, where it clattered against a tree trunk. The sound drew the predator's attention momentarily. In that instant, the woman spoke more firmly, a short command that somehow penetrated Xyler's pain-fogged mind despite the language barrier. The message was clear: move back. Slowly, summoning all his courage, Xyler began to inch away from the jaguar, whose teeth still penetrated his arm but whose bite had loosened. The woman continued her calm vocalizations, her body language projecting neither threat nor fear, but a quiet authority that seemed to confuse the predator. Finally, with a final warning growl, the jaguar released Xyler's arm. It backed away several steps, still watching both alien and human with wary eyes. The woman maintained her position, physically placing herself between the predator and Xyler without making any threatening moves. For several tense heartbeats, the jaguar held its ground. Then, With a last rumbling growl that seemed almost dismissive, it turned and melted into the undergrowth, a golden shadow vanishing into green. Only then did the woman turn her full attention to Xyler. Her eyes widened slightly, the first indication that his alien appearance surprised her, but she recovered quickly. She approached slowly, hands open to show she carried no weapons. Xyler clutched his injured arm to his chest, blue-green blood seeping through the torn environmental suit. His translator, thankfully still functional, activated as the woman began to speak. "You are hurt, Starchild," came the translated words, the technology struggling somewhat with the unfamiliar language patterns. "The forest spirit has tasted your blood, but chose to spare you. This is a powerful sign." Before Xyler could respond, the sound of crashing vegetation announced new arrivals. Dr. Thorne burst into the small clearing, a stun weapon raised, with Kyra close behind him. Both froze at the tableau before them, their injured child and a human native kneeling together on the forest floor. "Xyler!" Thorne's voice cracked with emotion. Fear, relief, and fury blended into a single word. He rushed forward, weapon still raised, positioning himself between his son and the human woman. "Get away from him!" The translator converted his words, causing the woman to rise smoothly to her feet. Rather than showing fear at the weapon or the alien appearance of the newcomers, she simply regarded Thorne with the same calm assessment she'd given the jaguar. "Father, don't," Xyler called out, his voice weak from pain and shock. "She saved me from the predator." Kyra moved to Xyler's side, medical scanner already evaluating his injuries. Puncture wounds, moderate blood loss, potential contaminants from the animal's oral bacteria, she reported clinically, though her hands shook slightly as she applied a sealing gel to the wounds. Thorne's weapon remained trained on the human woman. "How did you find us? What do you want?" The translator conveyed his hostile tone as well as his words. The woman simply tilted her head, considering him. When she spoke, her voice remained level. "I am Maya of the River People. I heard the cry of your child and the voice of the forest spirit you call Jaguar. I came to help as anyone would." She gestured to Xyler's arm. "Your child needs medicine for the spirit's bite. I have herbs that will prevent the burning sickness." "We have our own medicine," Thorne replied tersely, though he lowered his weapon slightly. Kyra looked up from tending Xyler. "Doctor, our antibiotics aren't calibrated for Earth pathogens. The database has limited information on local microorganisms. If she has knowledge of effective treatments." Thorne's internal conflict played out visibly on his features. His Xylosian training insisted that local remedies would be primitive, dangerous, certainly less effective than their advanced medical technology. But his son was injured on an alien world, exposed to countless unknown threats. "The ship," he decided finally. "We'll treat him at the ship, with our own methods. Then we can analyze any suggestions she might have." Maya seemed to understand the compromise, even before the translator finished. She nodded once, then pointed in a direction that Thorne realized, with some chagrin, was exactly where the stargazer lay hidden in the vegetation. "Your sky vessel is there," she said simply. "I will show you the path, and I will bring the medicine, whether you choose to use it or not." Thorne hesitated, then nodded curtly. He holstered his weapon and gathered Xyler carefully in his arms, mindful of the injured limb. "Lead on," as Maya guided them through the forest, taking paths that were invisible to Xylosian eyes. Thorne whispered harshly to his son. "What were you thinking? Disabling the security field? Wandering alone into an uncontrolled environment? You could have been killed." "I know, Father," Xyler replied weakly. "I just wanted to see the hummingbird up close." "The what?" "The small flying creature with blue feathers. It was so beautiful." Thorne fell silent, unable to comprehend how his carefully raised, thoroughly educated son could risk his life for such a trivial observation. But a glance at Kyra showed an expression that surprised him. Not shock or disapproval, but a kind of understanding that made him wonder what he was missing. They reached the stargazer quickly, Maya navigating the dense undergrowth with effortless familiarity. At the security perimeter, now fully reactivated she stopped. Rorik, 7 waited at the open airlock, its sensors having detected their approach. Wait, Kyra said as Thorn moved to carry Xyler aboard. Maya, you said you have medicine for the bite? The young woman nodded and opened one of her pouches, extracting several crushed leaves and what appeared to be a small amount of tree resin. This stops the burning sickness that comes from the jaguar's teeth. And this, she held up another, different leaf, dulls the pain. Kyra ran her scanner over the botanical offerings. These contain natural antibiotic compounds, she said with undisguised surprise. And this one has analgesic properties similar to our synthetics, but potentially better suited to the local bacteria. Thorn looked skeptical. Primitive herbal remedies compared to our medical technology? Not primitive, Kyra corrected. Adaptive. Evolved alongside the exact pathogens we're concerned about. Our medicines are designed for known threats. These, she gestured to Maya's offerings. These are designed specifically for this environment. After a moment of internal struggle, Thorn nodded. Apply them according to her instructions, then supplement with our treatments. Maya demonstrated the application. A poultice of crushed leaves pressed directly to the wound, secured with a wrapping of soft inner bark. The procedure was completed inside the Stargazer's medical bay, with Maya showing no sign of wonder or fear at the advanced technology surrounding her. As Xyler rested, sedated by both Maya's herbs and Xylosian medicine, Thorn, Kyra, and Maya gathered in the command center. How did you do it? Thorn asked finally, unable to contain his scientific curiosity. The predator, the jaguar, had my son in its jaws. Our data indicates they rarely release prey once captured. Maya considered the question thoughtfully. The jaguar is not evil. It is not good. It simply is. It hunts because it must eat. It protects its territory because it must survive. When I approached, I showed respect, but not fear. I made sounds that told it I was not a threat, but also not prey. I gave it a choice to leave without shame. Without shame? Kyra echoed, fascinated. All creatures have pride, Maya explained. The jaguar is a great spirit. To run from a threat brings shame. To abandon prey without reason brings shame. I gave it a reason, another large creature approaching with confidence, and I gave it a path to leave with dignity. Thorn shook his head, struggling to reconcile this explanation with his scientific worldview. You're anthropomorphizing, attributing human characteristics to an animal. Maya smiled slightly. Perhaps you are doing the opposite, trying to remove the spirit from a being that possesses one. The philosophical impasse hung between them, neither side willing to concede. Finally, Kyra changed the subject. Your people, the river people, how long have you lived in this forest? Since the great waters receded, Maya replied. Many, many generations. We learn the forest's ways from birth. Every plant, every animal, every season has its knowledge to share. And you've never been. Thorn searched for the right word. Frightened by its dangers? The diseases, the predators, the storms? Maya's expression suggested the question was strange to her. Should I fear my home? The forest gives us food, medicine, shelter. Yes, it also brings challenges. This is balance. We do not seek to control the forest. We seek to understand our place within it. The concept was so alien to Thorn's Xylosian mindset that he fell silent. On Xylos Prime, nature existed in carefully regulated biodomes, each species monitored, each interaction predicted and managed. The idea of accepting an uncontrolled environment as home was almost incomprehensible. Yet, as he watched Maya, her confident movements, her intimate knowledge of her surroundings, her apparent health despite constant exposure to what his people would consider extreme hazards, he felt the first tiny crack in his worldview. Over the next 2 days, as Xyler recovered and repairs to the Stargazer continued, Maya became an unexpected bridge between worlds. She visited daily, bringing fresh herbs for Xyler's wound, which was healing remarkably well under the combined treatment. She answered Kyra's endless questions about forest life with patient good humor, seemingly as curious about Xylosian culture as Kyra was about hers. To Thorn's surprise, Maya also proved unexpectedly helpful with the repairs. When they needed a particular resin to seal delicate components, she led them to a tree that produced exactly the right consistency. When they required flexible but strong fibers to replace damaged connectors, she showed them a plant whose inner bark, properly prepared, served the purpose perfectly. On the third day, with the stargazer nearly ready for departure, Maya invited them to visit her village. Thorn's immediate instinct was to refuse. Their mission protocols expressly forbade cultural contamination. But Kyra argued persuasively that they had already violated those protocols and that the opportunity to learn from a society that had adapted so successfully to what they had classified as a hostile environment was too valuable to dismiss. Besides, she added quietly, we owe her a debt for saving Xyler. In her culture, refusing such an invitation might be deeply offensive. Reluctantly, Thorn agreed, stipulating that they would maintain minimal contact and reveal no technology beyond what Maya had already witnessed. The village was a revelation. Nestled along a small tributary of the Amazon, it consisted of dwellings that blended so harmoniously with the surrounding forest that they were difficult to distinguish at first glance. Gardens of medicinal and food plants grew in carefully tended patches that mimicked natural clearings. Children played under the watchful eyes of elders, while adults engaged in various tasks: fishing, weaving, preparing food, crafting tools. What struck Thorn most forcefully was not the simplicity of their technology, but the complexity of their knowledge. As Maya introduced them to the village healer, an elderly woman named Nima, he watched in fascination as she identified and explained the uses of dozens of plants, described seasonal patterns of animal behavior with statistical precision, and demonstrated an understanding of local ecosystems that rivaled their most sophisticated models. Your people, he said to Maya as they observed a group fashioning elaborate traps. You don't just survive here. You thrive. This is the difference in our thinking, Maya replied thoughtfully. You see the forest as something to survive despite. We see it as something to live with, and because of. Every danger has a gift hidden within it, if you know how to look. That evening, the village held a small celebration in honor of their visitors. There was music, complex rhythms that Thorn found himself analyzing with growing appreciation, and stories told around fire pits. Xyler, his arm healing well, sat entranced as village children showed him how to play a simple game involving seeds and an intricate pattern drawn in the dirt. As night fell, Thorn found himself seated beside the village elder, a man named Kaimo whose weathered face spoke of decades lived in harmony with the demanding environment. Your son, Kaimo said through the translator, nodding toward Xyler, who was now attempting to learn a dance with Maya's patient guidance. He has the eyes of one who sees. He's always been observant, Thorn agreed, not entirely understanding. Kaimo smiled. Not just observant. Many observe. Few truly see. The jaguar saw him as prey. Maya saw him as a child in need. What did you see when you looked at the forest for the first time? The question caught Thorn off guard. I saw danger, unpredictability, chaos. And now, Thorn considered the village around him, the people who had welcomed strange beings from another world with curiosity rather than fear, who had shared their knowledge freely, who moved through their complex environment with the same confidence he felt in his sterile laboratories. Now I see. Adaptation, knowledge, perhaps wisdom I hadn't expected. Kaimo nodded, satisfied. Tomorrow you will return to the stars. When you tell others of Earth, what will you say? The question would have seemed presumptuous from anyone else, but from this elder, it felt like a necessary challenge. Thorn looked up at the stars, visible in patches through the forest canopy. I will have to reconsider our classification, he said finally. Level 5 hazardous ecosystem fails to capture the complexity. The dangers are real, but so are the opportunities for understanding, for learning approaches we hadn't considered. A good beginning, Kaimo said softly. And for your son? Thorn watched as Xyler laughed. The sound strange, yet wonderful from a child normally so reserved. For my son, this has been transformative. He saw something beautiful and reached for it. despite the risk. I would have called that reckless before. Now I'm not so sure. The next morning, as they prepared to depart, Maya and several villagers came to the stargazer to bid them farewell. They brought gifts, a small carved wooden jaguar for Xyler, herbs and seeds for Kyra to study, and for Thorn, a simple necklace of seeds and teeth that Kaimo explained was worn by those considered wise in the ways of the forest. Thorn, moved by the gesture, hesitated only briefly before offering his own gift in return, a small atmospheric analyzer that would help predict the increasingly erratic weather patterns they had discussed. This isn't advanced technology by our standards, he explained carefully. It won't disrupt your way of life, but it might help protect your village from unexpected storms. Maya accepted the device with appropriate solemnity, though her eyes twinkled with amusement at his concerns about disruption. After final farewells, the Xylosians boarded their vessel. As the stargazer rose above the canopy, Xyler pressed his face to the viewport, watching until the village disappeared from view. In orbit, preparing for the jump to hyperspace, Thorn recorded his official mission report. The factual data, biological samples, atmospheric readings, geological scans, were automatically compiled. But the subjective assessment was his responsibility. Preliminary classification of Earth as a Level 5 hazardous ecosystem requires significant qualification, he dictated. While objective dangers exist, indigenous human populations have developed sophisticated adaptive strategies and knowledge systems that merit further study. Recommended update: Level 5 hazardous ecosystem with exceptional collaborative potential. He paused, then added, personal addendum. Our assumptions about the relative value of technological versus ecological knowledge require reevaluation. The incident with the predator species demonstrates that understanding natural systems on their own terms, rather than imposing control, may offer alternative approaches to interplanetary research. As the stargazer accelerated away from Earth, Thorn found Xyler in the observation dome, the carved wooden jaguar clutched in his hands. "What are you thinking about?" Thorn asked, sitting beside his son. Xyler considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness. "I'm thinking about Maya, about how she wasn't afraid of the jaguar, even though she had no technology to protect her. She understood it in a way our scanners couldn't." Thorn nodded. "That's an important observation." "Father," Xyler said hesitantly, "when we return to Xylos Prime, could we visit the biosphere domes more often? I want to learn to see the animals the way Maya does." Instead of the automatic caution he would have expressed days earlier, Thorn found himself considering the request on its merits. "I think that could be arranged. Perhaps we both have something to learn about observation versus understanding." As Earth dwindled to a blue-green point behind them, Thorn reflected that he had come seeking biological samples and had instead found a profound challenge to his people's entire approach to the universe. The image of Maya standing calmly before a predator, offering it dignity rather than domination, would remain with him always, a reminder that there were many kinds of intelligence and many paths to wisdom among the stars.